What's up? This is the Benchwarmers. Our most recent basketball video was reacting to the All-Star starters. It's linked in the description, but today's video is predicting the All-Star reserves. The All-Star reserves should be coming out within the next day or two, and we're really excited to see what it is. However, we have our own opinions, and we have compiled our consensus Western and Eastern All-Star reserves. They are required to be 2 guards, 3 forwards/centers, and 2 wildcards on each side. Obviously, they don't play for the Western team or the Eastern team. They get drafted by the captains, who this year are Kevin Durant in the East and LeBron James, once again, in the West. So we'll start with our consensus Western guards off the bench. So take it away.
One important thing to note is that these reserve players are usually decided by player and coach rankings as well as the media rankings, and fan votes aren't taken into account as much. But these are the players that we believe deserve the spot, not necessarily the ones that may get it. But I guess it's going to overlap because the players who we think are going to get it are probably the ones that are going to get it, or so we hope. But anyway, starting off with the Western guard spot, we first have Damian Lillard. I think this one's pretty much a lock. He shot 30. He's shooting very efficiently, and he's getting 30 points per game. He's also averaging 8 assists. He probably should have been a starter, but this is basically a lock if he doesn't become a starter. Well, he already isn't a starter, but yeah, it's basically a lock. The second position, we gave it to Donovan Mitchell. He's playing very well. The Jazz are also playing very well. They went on 2 9-game winning streaks. He's shooting very efficiently. He's also averaging 25 points per game on 4 rebounds and 5 assists. I guess you could say that he orchestrates the Jazz offense in a way because he's a very big shooting threat, and he's also great at dunking, and he's super athletic. So he totally deserves this spot.
Yeah, and similarly with the front court spots, it was also a complete consensus. As the number 1 bench player for the forwards, we had Anthony Davis. His stats aren't incredible, but he's still a key part of that Lakers squad that is doing very well, and is 3rd in the Western Conference right now. And then next was Paul George, kind of similar to Anthony Davis, the second option on his team. And the Clippers, like the Lakers, I think they actually have the exact same record, and PG's playing very well as well. And then finally, we have a center, and that is Rudy Gobert. He's obviously been one of the best defensive players in the league consistently, and he's averaging around 14 and 13, which is definitely very solid. So complete consensus again, but you'll see that when we get to the wild cards, they'll change.
And now we go to the arguably hardest thing to decide in all of this, the Western Conference wildcards. So there's so many quality players on so many quality teams in the Western Conference. And I think we're just going to go through a quick shout out of a bunch of players who were under consideration or made it. So players such as Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson, then we had Chris Paul, Devin Booker, CJ McCollum, DeMar DeRozan, Jamal Murray, Andrew Wiggins, John Morant, Kristaps Porzingis, De'Aaron Fox, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, Christian Wood, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That's a lot of players, only 2 spots. We disagreed. I personally had the 2 Suns player, Devin Booker and Chris Paul. Andrew had Devin Booker and Zion Williamson, and Rohan had Zion Williamson and De'Aaron Fox, which means our consensus players were Devin Booker and Zion Williamson. So they are our Western Conference wildcard reserves. So our final reserves list for the West is Damian Lillard and Donovan Mitchell. For the guards, Anthony Davis, Paul George, and Rudy Gobert. For the forwards, and Devin Booker and Zion Williamson for the wildcards.
Now let's move on to the East, and starting off with the guards. These 2 were basically a consensus. We had Jaylen Brown going as the first spot and James Harden as the second spot. Jaylen Brown was arguably going to be a starter. I believe the media actually had him ranked 2nd, which would make him the 2nd starter. He's averaging 26 points per game on very efficient shooting. It's 50% from the field and 40% from the 3. But he's also doing this in 5 less minutes than James Harden. And he's also played more games than James Harden. James Harden's averaging similar stats, 24 points on 50-40 shooting. He's also averaging 8 rebounds and 12 assists. So in spite of his rebound and assist stats, James Harden is just not as efficient in terms of the amount of minutes that he plays per games. He also played less games, and he didn't really want to play at the beginning. So I think Jaylen Brown deserves a spot as the first reserve guard over Harden. But either way, those two players are probably going to be the guards on the reserve spots.
All right, and then next we have the 3 front court players from the East. And the first one was a complete consensus. Again, we have Jason Tatum. He's averaging 26, 7, and 5, I believe, currently, which is really incredible. But unfortunately, it hasn't really translated into an incredible record for the Celtics. And that's likely a major reason as to why he's not a starter. But then when we got to the second and third players, there was a bit less of a consensus. We ended up having Domantas Sabonis at second, and then Jimmy Butler at third. I actually have Jimmy Butler at second, but the overall they've both been incredible this season. Sabonis is averaging like 23 and 12, I believe, currently. Jimmy Butler, he's averaging not as great stats, like around 17 or 18, 7 and 7, but I think I just had him a bit higher here because of he is the number one option for the Heat, and we saw how much of a difference maker he was after he came back from injury, because the Heat were really struggling before that. But when Butler came back, it made a big difference. So I think just as an impact player, I think Jimmy Butler's is better overall.
Yeah, I actually had Bam Adebayo there because similar reason for the Heat. But he actually is averaging more points with like almost 20 a game, shooting 57 from the field. He's averaging around 10 rebounds, 5.5 assists, a steal, and a block. So very well-rounded. He has played more games than Jimmy. Jimmy was out for a couple of weeks due to virus protocols. So I think that Bam's further improvement this season merits him another all-star spot. As we go into the Eastern Conference wildcards, again, extremely hard to try to figure out who should be here. I'll run through a bunch of players which we considered. Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, Chris Middleton, Kemba Walker, Malcolm Brogdon, Miles Turner, Kyle Lowry, Pascal Siakam, Terry Rozier, Julius Randle, Zach LaVine. Then we had Bam Adebayo, obviously, then Trae Young, Nikola Vucevic, Russell Westbrook, and Jeremy Grant. So these are all the players who we considered to make the All-Star team. And there was a bit more clarity. There was at least like a little bit of agreement, but we still had 5 unique players who were put there. We had, from my side, Nikola Vucevic and Trae Young, both of them purely for their statistical prowess. Vucevic obviously averaging around 23 and 11 a game on a struggling Magic team, and Trae Young averaging 26 and 9 assists on a struggling Hawks team. Both Andy and Rohan had Zach LaVine. So this is our first person who we had in our consensus picks. He is having an amazing season, averaging 28.5 points for the Chicago Bulls. And he's just been really good, really amazing. And they differed on their second pick. Rohan had Tobias Harris, which is pretty interesting. The second player from the best team in the East is a pretty good argument there. And Andy had Julius Randle for his favorite team, the New York Knicks. They've been surprising quite a lot, currently the 8th seed in the East. And Julius Randle has been having a really good season and much improved playmaking. However, considering we had a bunch of different picks beyond Zach LaVine, our second player was Bam Adebayo, because that was my selection for an Eastern front court over an Eastern wildcard. So it ended up being Bam Adebayo and Zach LaVine for our wildcards. Overall, our East team at the bench were Jaylen Brown, James Harden, Jason Tatum, Domantas Sabonis, Jimmy Butler, Zach LaVine, and Bam Adebayo. So that wraps it up. Once again, you can run through the teams. I mentioned them at the end of each segment of the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference. Name players who you think that we forgot or we could have mentioned, maybe players you think should make it or shouldn't make it. But these are our final picks. These will be an image on screen right now. And you can look at that really quickly. And this is the Benchwarmers signing off from the All-Star Reserves. See ya.